Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Solio Analytics. We are into our first international break, and first international break gives us an opportunity to take a step back again and talk about analytics. What is analytics? Why do we use analytics? Why are we obsessing over Solio and all the things that it brings? And no one than somebody who the community knows very well, Sertalp. I will introduce you in a second, but first I'll come to my co-host Jonny, who has been swimming through the FPL season very nicely without having made a transfer so far. How are you feeling, Jonny?
Yeah, I'm good. Swimming so nicely that I missed the pod last week. Too laid back, too relaxed. I have now activated my wild card though. So we are kicking off. We're finally doing something with it. How about you? How are you feeling?
Good. I'm not. I haven't activated my wildcard, and we're going to phase it out, right? You'll do yours now. I'll do mine in 13, and we'll see what the differences are. But it's good to hear. We have some nice wildcard content coming for next week. But to this week, now to properly introduce you, Sertalp is the co-founder of Solio Analytics. We're going to hear about the story of how he came about Solio. But before that, stepping even further back, Sertalp, tell us about yourself. How are you doing, and how did you start playing FPL?
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. It's just a privilege to be here. Just to introduce myself, I'm Sertalp. I'm originally from Turkey, and I live in the United States. I came here for my PhD many years ago, and then I stayed. I work here on in a software company, and I work on optimization. Just to mention briefly, I think, well, Turkey, obviously in Turkey, football is pretty big, and then I was always a football fan. But then I learned about FPL, and then I realized that my professional skills are actually somewhat applicable, and then I was a little bit surprised that no one did it before, or didn't, or maybe they did it and kept to themselves. I'm not sure. And so yeah, I started playing. I wanted to bring some of the analytics knowledge I have, and then things kind of snowballed from there.
So what is your job title specifically? What is it that you do in your day stuff?
My job title is Principal Operations Research Specialist.
Lots of words.
So operations research is the umbrella term for everything about what we call prescriptive analytics. So we do decision making. So it's kind of science of decision making, or better decision making, I should say. So yeah, I just help customers, basically consulting projects, to use our software to make better decisions. Not FPL decisions, but other types of business decisions.
And how did you come about, using this into FPL? Because there's the very popular FPL Optimized, which was such a revolutionary website, or is such a revolutionary website. And then, of course, in this video today, we'll talk about how optimization is important in the whole modeling aspect of it. But first, just about your journey of how did you start to create these tools for FPL?
So it actually started... it was during summer. I was having my summer vacation. It was COVID times, actually, at the beginning of COVID, that summer. And I was lucky that I learned about FPL just around that time, because if it was a regular time, I probably wouldn't have time to think about FPL properly. But I was on vacation. Luckily, my laptop was with me, and my colleague Buzz, which we did the FPL Optimized podcast together, he kind of challenged me to play the game. He said, "You know so much about numbers and analytics. Let's see if you can do this." He also works at the same company as I am. He's in the marketing department. So he knew that I was going to approach it a little bit analytically. And we have done some optimization projects with him in past. So he knew that I was, I would probably, weaponize optimization. And the first thing I did was I just looked at the literature. I just checked what's academically available out there, and I found a master's thesis on using optimization for FPL. And then it was very comprehensive. I think I shared the link over the years maybe more than 100 times. to lots of people asking about it. So I realized that it is a pretty good model, and I can model it very quickly. It took me maybe 2 hours at most to write the entire thing in one go. But then I realized, well, I will talk about the analytics a little bit more in detail, hopefully, but optimization depends on prediction. So you need to know like who are the good players and make the optimization based on that. Then I realized, well, I don't have the data. And then my first attempt, I'm kind of maybe ashamed to say this, but I found a website listing FIFA ratings of players. I said, well, I can optimize my squad based on this. And I started with that team, actually. I optimized over FIFA ratings. And that season, like, even though like optimization was there and I was able to optimize, I was just optimizing, FIFA game stats, which wasn't particularly useful for FPL. And then I realized, oh, that's quite, different. Like defensive midfielders, for example, they were not actually that viable. I realized it way too late. But yeah, since I had the tool like optimization solver ready anyway, then I found people sharing their predictions, FBI Review and Mikhail Tokvam. I started incorporating their projections, and I realized that, oh, I actually get pretty good results. Then I wanted to share it with other people, actually. So I realized that, well, maybe I can, this is a good gateway for me to maybe show what optimization is, because optimization is not widely known, but it's not as fancy as machine learning. Everyone heard about machine learning. Everyone heard about AI to a degree, but optimization is actually one of the most useful things that companies use, and they typically try to keep it to themselves, which is pretty funny. Like we do a lot of consulting work to customers. Rarely a customer agrees to do some kind of like promo, like advertisement with us. And they always say we don't want our rivals to hear about it. And I'm not even exaggerating. It's just happened so many times.
It's too good is the issue.
Too good too good to be true. But yeah, I kind of like see FPL as a good way to promote optimization. I'm such a enthusiast about this whole operations research field in general.
And how does Solio fit into all this? How did that become the next step, I suppose, of how you wanted to take the analytics journey or optimization journey in FPL?
Well, Solio is a result of me, I will say, like talking with other people regularly. I realized that, well, yes, I wrote the solver that is inspired by that master's thesis I mentioned, but I realized that it's a little bit difficult to use for non-technical people. So I tried to reduce the barrier to entry. First of all, like I tried to make it very simple for people to use it. I was writing it in a way that, oh, just put this prediction data here and then run this code. But people had to install things that they don't know. Like they had to install like Python. Like some people don't know or haven't used Python before. And then you are saying that don't download this optimization software. So all of these are adding some frictions, right? So you lose so many people who are willing to try, but they're like, I couldn't figure out how to download this, so I'm gonna skip it. I'm just gonna not use analytics at all. So developing a browser-based interface was my kind of like dream. And then I partially did it for myself. I developed something. Actually, Jonny used it before, so he knows a little bit. But since I'm coming from an optimization point of view, I added so many parameters, so many constraints, like optional constraints. The whole thing looks very intimidating.
The menu is very long on the left-hand side. The first time we used it, it's just listing absolutely everything you could possibly want to change in one box, basically. And it was great to get once you got the hang of it. And I would say also, like when you'd first put that optimization repo on GitHub and started getting a few people into it, was when I decided to learn how to install Python and how to write Python code and how to learn that. So even in the early days when the barrier for entry was a little bit higher, actually for me personally, and I know a few other people, that was like actually this is a barrier I've kind of wanted to jump for a little while. Now I've got a reason I really want to do it, rather than just, because I think it'll be useful. So I learned optimization and programming via Sertalp's FPL optimization. So
That's
I
amazing
have
to
him to
hear,
thank for that too, and I know many others do as well. So I'll
Yeah.
add that in there.
Thank you. But yeah, so I also received so many like messages from people who are making like college decisions. So they said I chose industrial engineering or operations research because I was fascinated by optimization. So I just felt a little bit uneasy the first time I heard about it. I felt like I'm kind of like changing these people's fates a little bit, like by maybe I'm exaggerating, how useful optimization is. But I'm just always happy to hear that people are learning or like willing to learn. And as I mentioned, so my earlier attempts were so complicated. It is as if like you don't know anything about driving anything, and then suddenly you are in the cockpit of a plane. Like so many buttons, like you don't know where to start. So I wanted to take a step back. I was talking with James. I was talking with Jonny around that time. So I expressed my desire to develop an interface that's very easy for people to use, bring their beliefs, because I think analytics is very like misunderstood at many levels. Like when people use analytics as an umbrella term for many things that they don't like about the FPL in general. So I think it was our goal to change the perception and develop something that's very easy to use and very easy to understand.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's why you're so well respected in the community, because you treat analytics as, one of the tools, and everything that you've done in the space. I can speak for myself. I've learned so much in terms of how you think about the game, how optimization works in this. I mean, we were all doing some kind of analytics, but you've just packaged it now into something which is much more understandable. So speaking of, how you've made analytics simple for people, maybe it's a good time to move into the next section, or the main section of the presentation, which is telling people what is analytics and why should people embrace analytics.
Yeah, just before I started, I want to talk about this slide on screen. So as I mentioned, I was doing some optimization before FPL, and then it was like a proof of concept for me to develop the solver. Like I actually experimented a little bit to see if analytics can work in FPL, but then I realized that the whole prediction thing is quite challenging. I will talk about it. Then I developed the solver, then I wanted to share it with others, and then I realized that there are so many people who want to talk about these things, and they were kind of like messaging me separately. So we started the FPL Analytics Discord server, and now we have a pretty big community there, more than 2,000 people, and we have lots of active users daily. And then kind of like Solio is the last step of all these steps. We partially talked about it, but yeah, okay. Let me talk about analytics now. So analytics is such a big term that has many steps in it, and the way we see it, like when we do consulting work, is there are 4 levels of analytics typically, and the boundaries between them are a little bit fuzzy at times, but generally speaking, there are 4 levels, and it always starts with collecting data. If you don't have data, first you need to go and collect it. And you might remember that there was a big push about big data like many years ago. That's like, we have the space, we need to collect data about our users, our business. And then the second step is understanding. This is where the experts come into play. They need to read the data and then make a sense of it and explain why did something happen. And then the third step is predicting the future. I mean, this is why we do analytics, right? So because we collect the historical data, we try to make sense of it so that we can predict what will happen in future. So this is true for fast food sales, true for real estate, true for our economy. Like everything depends on this. Like the fact that we are trying to predict what's the next thing, what's going to happen tomorrow. And then after you have a good idea, the last step is to plan. Well, or you have a prediction what will happen tomorrow. How would you react if you know that house prices is going to go up? Like, should you buy more houses, for example, or do you know if you know that economy is going to go bad? Like, what should you do? What's the ideal thing to do? That's what we call optimization. But yeah, before I go into details of these, do you guys have any questions?
Jonny, you go first.
All right. Yeah, I think it's how I try and think about this, and it's how I hadn't sort of seen it compartmentalized like this until starting talking to you and realizing that actually, I think these are essentially the steps that everyone's doing when we say that people are using analytics. It's that this is the process that they're doing. It's just that collecting the data can take many forms. So for a lot of people, for us, it's collecting data to generate predictive models. So we'll look at the expected goals data, we'll look at shots data, we'll look at whatever. Collecting data, those shots data are coming from companies that are turning what they see on the pitch into data points. So watching to see who's playing, to see who's further up the pitch, that's collecting data. Working out whether that's something that's going to be repeatable. Is this run into the box something that this player is going to make a lot? Is, that's diagnostic, and then predictive if you think they're going to keep doing that. So I think this methodology is something that I see a lot of people using. So is this how you tackled it at first? Is this how you thought, okay, this is the methodology I want to streamline or improve? Or were there different areas that you started in first? Did you see it like holistically as a whole, or was there a particular area of these four that you started in when you came to FPL?
So since I do optimization for a living, so I typically do the last step, prescriptive analytics. And when projects come to us, typically the companies have already collected data. They have some kind of like insight why things are happening. And they also typically have a good understanding. So sometimes like this is not even like predictive in the sense of like prediction. Sometimes it's like routing optimization. Companies already know how long it takes from point A to point B during a regular time, during rush hour. So what we do is we kind of like optimize, what kind of vehicle you should use, things like this. So since I'm coming from that angle, I was really hoping that I will just start with the last step and be done, because that's what we do. We arrive and we kind of assume that the data is perfect already, and then we just do our model the problem and then share the results. But when you do it, often you realize that it's quite tricky, because when you optimize a decision for a customer, you share the results. In an ideal world, customer will say, this is amazing. They will shake your hand and go there. You go your separate ways. But that's not how it happens. Every time customers look at it and then they say, there's something wrong here. They realize that they forgot to add a specific constraint. They forgot that the objective maybe is different. Like maybe they are not trying to minimize the distance. Maybe they are trying to maximize their profit. So it is an iterative thing. So you kind of go back and then fix stuff. As for us, it is sometimes, correcting the predictive stuff. Maybe their prediction is wrong. Maybe their objective is wrong. Maybe model is missing some key components. Same thing, I think, happened in FPL for me. I mean, I came from the optimization angle. I looked at it. I realized that I need prediction data. And then when you are doing the prediction data, you realize that there are things that you don't quite agree with models. Like sometimes, this is a big discussion, and people think it's kind of like a black or white thing. Oh, like I don't agree with this model is saying, so the model is useless. That's not entirely true. I mean, they are predicting so many players. Maybe I have a different opinion on that particular player. Maybe they are minutes, maybe they are penalty share, whatever. But it is not a reason to throw away the whole thing. Maybe, they are doing a great job except this player, right? So then I realized maybe I need to add some little bit context to this just for me to understand how the data is created. So even though the graph goes from, bottom left to, top right, like I came from the other direction. I optimized it. I didn't like the team. What's wrong with here? Oh, I need to change the prediction data. Then I learned about maybe like reading, I I learned about which managers you can trust when they're doing a press conference, and that's part of diagnostic analytics actually.
Yeah, very true.
And then I went all the way to descriptive, just collecting data. But yeah, my journey is from the other direction, which wasn't fun.
One of the things that when I saw this chart, and obviously I've had the opportunity to listen to this presentation before, is it's fascinating how this chart describes the journey of an FPL manager, right? So when you start off with watching football, you're really good at descriptive analytics. You're really good at saying this team is looking great, like Liverpool has signed all these players, they're looking great, they're looking amazing. And then as you grow into FPL, which is a game which is more than just watching the football, you get all these other components which you're going to be talking about in more detail, which is, okay, you know that Liverpool are going to do well, but who's going to start? Who will get the minutes? Who will do well? And then you get to the prediction on, actually, I think the goal shares will change, or this guy will be on penalties. And then optimization. You may think that Isak is still a good pick, but given his price, maybe Gyökeres was on penalties. Like all of this, the journey, I can just see it on the chart on how you can evolve as an FPL manager. So I really love this chart.
I think sometimes as well, the bit that you were talking about where like the output of the prescriptive analytics, so for work, if the output of your optimization problem was a solution that people didn't really like, then kind of trying to work out, okay, at what point has it gone wrong? Because it might be that the predictive analysis is really good and the data is really good, and actually the optimization is for, as you said, they were optimizing for the wrong objective, or did not put some constraints in. So sometimes if you generate solutions with these sort of tools in FPL and you don't like the team it's outputting, it's not always that the model's wrong. It's maybe that the optimization isn't optimizing for what you want. So maybe, this is where we're trying to bring in stuff further down the line to advertise Solio is actually giving you a personal touch on that optimization process as well as on that predictive analytics process. God, I was going to say analytics enough times. I should get the hang of saying it. So is that something that's what you noticed when you were, I guess, when you're optimizing with FIFA rankings? Like the team's good. It comes out and it's like that's a perfectly acceptable team, but you then look at the output and go, okay, well, there's too many defensive mids. They don't actually score points in FPL. This was before DEFCONs, obviously. So is it that I've optimized for the wrong objective, or is it that my data's a bit wrong? And I think this is these are the discussions that we have a lot in the analytics circles in FPL, is actually like often trying to fine tune in each of these four processes rather than generically as a whole. But we can move on to starting with a bit of detail in each step. Do you want to start with descriptive at the start? We'll go the opposite way to the way that you normally go. We'll start at the bottom, start at the beginning.
Yeah, so exactly. So the descriptive analytics is the first step of analytics. So you need to collect data. And for us, it means, well, we don't collect data ourselves typically. We looked at resources like FBref. Yeah, they are getting their data from Opta, same as like FODMOB. But essentially, you look at some resources, like some sources for the data, because they are collecting like how many shots each player took, what was the location, what was the expected goals, which is not exactly descriptive, but it is semi-descriptive. And you look at, like, if you go FBref, you can find a ton of like other defensive metrics too, like how many passes into the like final third, what's the expected assists, goal involvement, all those stuff. But someone needs to collect the data. And as you guys mentioned, eye test is one of them. Actually, you can just watch the game and collect data yourself. And this is this could be as simple as, I watched this game and then this forward I have actually played as a left back. So then you know that, well, maybe this guy is not going to get goals, right? So you are collecting some data points that you are hoping to use in future. So that's one type of like descriptive analytics. You are just recording what happened in the game, like what happened. And it could be also, there are also stuff like, maybe there's a penalty and you don't know who the penalty taker is in that team. And then you are trying to read what the players are doing. Are they talking, discussing between themselves who should take the penalty? or is it clear? And then, because again, you will try to make a prediction in future, right? So you will say that, oh, like they didn't even discuss, this guy just stepped in, so clearly they talked about it, and this is clearly the penalty taker of this team. So those kind of details can be important. So anything like this is descriptive. But typically in analytics, when you are trying to streamline the entire thing, you want objective data, not subjective. So some of those stuff very easy to put into a spreadsheet and then analyze. There are some stuff that you need to that comes into play in the later stages, either in the prediction stage or maybe optimization, but certainly in diagnostic. And before I switch to diagnostic, I should say that descriptive data is sometimes misleading, and people typically just don't like this fact, but because I feel like they are looking at the wrong stat. This is as easy, like as simple as, like, for example, suppose a forward is playing in a really good position, he's getting lots of passes into dangerous positions, but let's say all of them are offside. Okay, so this guy wasn't able to get a single shot the entire game, but he received 3 really good passes and they were very slightly offside. If you look at the data, you will see that, oh, this guy recorded an XG of 0. Like, he was practically useless. And you might think that, well, the stat is lying because I watched this guy and he was really good into getting into good positions. He was just simply unlucky because VAR turned it from a very small difference with the offside. So, but again, even that is a descriptive analytics, right? So you are kind of you have noticed that he was able to get into really good positions 3 times in that game, and you think that he will continue doing this and then he will probably get goals. So what we say, like, sometimes people are just trying to summarize these things as like, oh, top XG generators, these players. There's obviously some signal in it, but there's also some noise in it, and people sometimes get very obsessed over those noise, and they just declare that, well, analytics doesn't work, I don't believe in it. But as you see, like, there is it is a very interesting dynamic. So descriptive stat necessarily doesn't mean the objective truth about everything. Like, you can't really record everything into a spreadsheet that way. Which brings us to the second stage of analytics. But before I go to the second stage, do you guys have any questions about this, or do you want to add anything about the descriptive analytics step?
I would say on this one, I think this is often the one that is disputed, in the sense of, like you mentioned, that example. Another one is, somebody's crossed the ball and the striker was about to touch the ball but didn't touch the ball and didn't record a shot on goal or didn't get any XG for it. But I think I would say 2 things to this. First thing is, over a larger sample, these things normalize. Sometimes you get the ball at your feet when you weren't in the right position and then you scored the goal anyway. So over time, the larger the sample, I think this normalizes.
Exactly.
And I think the second thing that people miss is there are similar error bars in any other process of descriptive data gathering or eye test gathering. Like, you cannot watch the player for the whole 90 minutes and get your analysis. You are also using some moments. So therefore, I think we have to recognize that it's not flawless, but also that over a larger sample, and the larger the better, it's the best we can do.
Exactly. You are right. I mean, the more data we have about the player, a better idea we have about their ability. Like, we have so many data about Salah, for example, that we are pretty confident about his goal share in general. Like, if Liverpool is going to score like 10 goals, we know that, maybe roughly 3 of them will be Salah goals. So more data you have about the player, those like small noise, they kind of disappear, right? So that's why, we talked about small sample size a lot. So 1 game week of data, 2 game week of data, even 3, 5, sometimes it's too small. Like, you can't really conclude anything about it. But yes, that's a really great point.
I think also to add is that if we're taking this like descriptive data of how the players have done over a short sample, so we've had 3 rounds of fixtures at the minute so far. So there's been 30 games, 3 for each team. So if we're trying to describe what's happened there and use that to then jump to our diagnostic and predictive data points, then we should expect there to have been some noise in those first 3 weeks. So we should expect that some player who's only normally okay and we predict to continue to be okay for those 3 weeks has been really good, has been much better. Because equally, there's another player who's about as good as him who's underperformed and done a lot worse. So while we see these over-predictive and overperforming and underperforming players in these smaller sample sizes that tend to even out over time, it's harder to get lucky consistently over a long period, whereas over a short period, because there's enough players and enough teams, you expect some of them to deviate from the average expected outcome. So just because you can say, okay, this player descriptively has been very good. They got a lot of shots, they got a lot of goals, they had 2 penalties, whatever. That doesn't necessarily translate to, I predict them to continue to be this good. There might be other reasons why this player has got a lot better than they had been in their previous parts of their career. Maybe they're really young, maybe they're in a new position. There are reasons why players make this jump. But players that just suddenly make a jump out of nowhere might just be that these were the 3 games that everything clicked and it all just, the bounce of the ball went well for them. So that's where you don't have to dispute this player has been bad. Don't look at this data. It's this player has been good, but that doesn't mean he's going to continue to be this good. So I think it's that relation between the descriptive data and the predictive data that we need to try and pick apart and make sure that we're making reasonable conclusions from, as well as actually, are we reasonably describing what happened? I think there's a bit of both at play. Is all I'd add. But.
Yeah, it's just like tossing a coin. Like you got heads 3 times in a row, doesn't mean that it's gonna be head every time. Yeah. You need to keep tossing so that you can kind of like converge to an average. But yeah, it's a great point. Diagnostic analytics. Diagnostic analytics is simply trying to understand why things happened the way they happened. This could be as simple as trying to understand a particular lineup. Like I know that people like Luke, who's trying to understand what the starting lineup is, what Pep is thinking with that starting lineup. So essentially you are trying to read the game at a deeper level. Like you are looking at the data, you look at the starting lineup and you're trying to understand why this happened. Oh, like this defender was injured, so he had to play with 3 defenders, blah, blah. So diagnostic is essentially trying to explain why things happened. This could be also things like, I wasn't expecting this team to score 3 goals in this particular game, but maybe, the opposition was having a really bad day. So they were able to get into good positions, or maybe they took very low XG shots and then they simply got lucky. Maybe it's a goalkeeper's mistake. But essentially you are trying to understand, and this is the fun part of football, right? That's why we listen commentators from BBC Sport. Pras was also giving advice about FPL in their stream. Or shows like Golazo or podcasts. You are trying to understand if a team is good, were they simply unlucky, is everything going okay with this team. So that's kind of like diagnostic, is on top of descriptive stuff. You are making sure what you have collected matches you are trying to again make sense of why things happened in a particular way. This step is obviously very subjective at times, because descriptive stats typically are very objective. Like either a player took a shot or not. Sometimes there is some debate about whether a particular player touched the ball or not.
Was it an assist? Was it not an assist? Yeah, we've all been through those ones. So yeah, there's grey areas, but it's much more objective mostly.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But diagnostic is exactly. Diagnostic is very subjective at times. Typically is. you can listen, you can watch the game yourself, you can come up with a different conclusion. Like you can watch one Liverpool game and suddenly say that, yeah, they're the best, they're going to score 5 goals every game from now. But someone else can look at it and say that, well, simply opposition was really bad that day. Like it doesn't mean that they're good. So yeah, diagnostic is a little bit deeper. You need lots of expert knowledge. And I wanted to talk about diagnostic because like people often assume that people who do analytics, they don't think about these things. Like they simply look at the shot data, XG data, and then they say that, well, Salah is the best. That's not exactly true. Like diagnostic is a very valuable part of prediction. I mean, if it was true that we were just looking at the data and then making decisions based on that, we talked about this many times, but then there are a lot of like betting markets that you can make a lot of money. Like not saying that you should, but like there is a I think disconnection from like collecting the data and then jumping to prediction. We often have this step of diagnostic. We don't typically talk about it because again, it's very subjective, but typically there's a consensus that people just gather around. And you see that outcome in the predictive analytics step anyway. But particularly for football, diagnostic step is very subjective for many sports actually, but especially for football. Diagnostic is just it's a step that I'm not very experienced, to be honest, but I find it pretty fascinating because you need people who have watched lots of games or they know what they're talking about so that they can make sense essentially what the data is telling you.
And I would just say on the diagnostic part, I mean, again, I appeal to the non-analytics users that are non-analytics users today. I think this is the edge. When you start using tools, if you feel that you bring a different element to it, let's say you're a Liverpool fan and you understand how the dynamics are going to work with Isak, Wirtz, Gakpo, Ekitike, Salah, and what that changes, how that's going to change. This is exactly where, of course, you're also getting into a little bit of prediction, but we will talk about the prediction part, but also just understanding that Ekitike has done really well in the first 3 game weeks. What does that mean with the Isak signing? So there's a lot of, this is where your football knowledge, your understanding of the game, you going to watch the match of the days and everything else can come into it. And this, I think, is my favorite part of Solio, right? I mean, this element of you being able to diagnose, I always say it comes with a warning, because sometimes in our brains we overcorrect or we undercorrect and we just don't know what is the right way. But I want to say to people who do think, people can have very strong views about Bruno Fernandes or Salah this year or Isak when he plays for Liverpool. So I think this is where that is an element of analytics, that it goes into the model, and you have the ability with Solio that if you differ with market odds or different things, you can use your diagnostic knowledge to actually make a change and get better results.
I think as well, like without jumping ahead to the predictive part just yet, but again, if we talk about the relationship between each successive step, so we talked about descriptive to diagnostic, from the diagnostic to the predictive level, if you understand what's going into the predictive model and how this predictive level works, then you understand how your diagnostic learnings or opinions will factor into that predictive model. I think a lot of the over and under corrections often come from having a very strong diagnostic, you're actually strong at this level and you've inferred some really useful insights, but you haven't quite managed to connect that to what that means at a predictive level. So maybe you can say, okay, I think Isak's going to be playing off the left and Ekitike is going to be playing in the box, and that means that Ekitike is going to score this many more goals than Isak or whatever. Gakpo's not going to play, something like that. I'm not saying that's what it is as an example. I don't know. There's a lot of attackers at Liverpool. But if you understand what is happening at the diagnostic and at the predictive level and what the relationship is, you can better infer what your diagnostic learnings will mean for the predictions. And sometimes the overcorrection and the undercorrection comes from not understanding that relationship. So understanding what percentage, at a very basic level, we all look at who's taking the penalties. if you know what percentage of goals for a team tend to be penalties, which is usually somewhere around 7 to 10%, often usually in the betting markets or the predictive analysis that we've done before, you know how much to move the goal lines if you think this player's on penalties and this player isn't. Obviously, in our tool, would try and bring in penalty share for you. But if your relationship from diagnostic to predictive is to over-predict penalties, you think that 20% of goals are penalties, then you're going to overcorrect when you think someone else is on penalties. So it's not just like, I think people have this really strong diagnostic approach, and what they need to do to unlock the power of that is to understand how that plays into this whole process, into the predictive nature, to then better build into the optimization nature. So I think there's also people who are very strong at understanding the predictive nature but don't have these diagnostic skills, so just kind of make do with the baseline. So if you think you've got an edge in this level, that will flow through. So I think a good analytics FPL manager is strong at all four of these levels, and also at transitioning from one to the other. It's not just about other ones, but there are lots of people in the community, I'd agree, who are strong at this diagnostic tool. And what we want to do, analytics for all, is part of our mantra at Solio, is to allow people to use that diagnostic power to really build better teams, build better, generate better optimized solutions.
Yeah, exactly. I wish we had that graph, but one particular graph that I really enjoyed in recent time is from Rob. He was just collecting data during the game about the goal markets, and there was a particular case where the goal rate of a player increased very sharply, and then if you look at the game, that player actually scored 2 goals in that game. And then suddenly, now the models are thinking, or the markets are thinking, if there's a penalty, this player will take it, even though he's not the designated penalty taker, because probably his teammates will allow him to get a hat trick, right? So you can see from the graph that immediately the designated penalty taker's goal share dropped. And then maybe 10 minutes later, that player got subbed off, that the player who scored 2 goals, and then the designated penalty taker got his goal share back. So it just increased, even though there's less time now. So you look at the data and you can try to understand why did this happen, and then you realize that, oh, it's because of the hat trick chance for this particular player. Then you kind of know what the markets are thinking about designated penalty taker in that team, which is pretty fascinating for me to see. Okay,
shall we move on? Prediction.
Yeah, the prediction is the core in FPL, right? So everyone is trying to predict what's gonna happen, who's gonna get the next goals. Prediction is quite challenging because it's the third stage, and you need a really good descriptive stats, a good understanding of the game. Diagnostic analytics should be completed, but then at the prediction level, there is a lot of I don't want to say noise, but it is not an exact science, right? Because you can predict that Salah is going to score maybe 0.7 goals in the next game. It doesn't tell you the whole story. There is typically there's a mean, there's some variance around it. But for the prediction, particularly predictive analytics, we have a few resources. Well, obviously, the first one is betting markets, as I mentioned, because these people are, basically betting their money on it. So they are trying to predict, who will score goals, how many goals will be scored. There are some really weird markets too. You sum the goal minutes, you get a number, you are trying to predict that number. So, but essentially, everyone is trying to predict what will happen in a football game, and that's what we use in Solio too. So we kind of track betting markets and try to convert it into FPL predictions. There are also other predictive models available, other commercial or open or free models. FPL Review is obviously one of the most famous ones. There's Mikhail Toklam's transfer algorithm, and a lot of websites also doing it now. Scott had the rate my team thing for, I think they were one of the first, or maybe the first one. And then Hub has their own model. So like everyone is trying to predict who will get the points, right? And there are also people like Vamps. He has a Discord server and he's predicting not only FPL, maybe not even FPL itself, but a ton of other games, ton of other fantasy games. And do you know how many games is it, Johnny?
It's I think it's 40 to 50 different leagues. He's modelling the fantasy game for. I know for the Premier League, there's a good half a dozen different formats as well. So he's doing all of those formats too. So all the ones that I play: FPL, Dream Team, Fan Team, Telegraph, etc. All of those as well. So yeah, it's and he's playing them all as well. I don't know how he does it. But yeah, if you're interested in a fantasy league that isn't the Premier League, then come and check out Vamps' server. He's got, I think he won the Romanian and the Croatian league last year or something.
Yes.
Something like that. Give him his credit. But all sorts. But basically, he's worked on this methodology that he's been able to apply to any league. So he's gone for scale. He's like, okay, I can collect this data at all leagues. I can do the diagnostic assumptions, and I can predict all of them. So you can do it on scale if you're very streamlined with your descriptive and diagnostic levels too. So,
like for example, in
you do a bit of this, right, Jonny?
Sorry.
Yes, yeah. So I do a bit of modeling for. I don't do so much for other leagues. I do a lot for different variations of the Premier League ones. And I'll give credit to Samwise as well, who doesn't like getting as much credit as he deserves. He does a lot of work in the analytics community in the Discord server for these multi-format games. So actually, it's often, the scoring system for some is quite similar. So like once you predict goals, then you just go, okay, well it's 6 points in this game and 5 points in this game and whatever. But there's also other scoring mechanics. So there's tackles in Dream Team and Telegraph. So once we started getting defensive contributions in FPL, it was like, okay, well we've looked into a bit of this before. There's shots on target stuff. There's all these like different metrics you're trying to predict. So for most of them, it is goals, assists, clean sheets is your bread and butter. But there's all sorts of different bits. So the DEFCONs this season was an interesting challenge where we had to kind of think, okay, we need to go back to the start on what's descriptive of these metrics, what's descriptive of the team styles, and what can we infer about how the teams are playing that's going to lead to these defensive contribution points. And that was quite it was quite fun, and it was like a kind of new way. I think we've got quite used to just goals, assists, clean sheets. Who's playing? Actually, having a new one was interesting over the summer.
Okay, over to you, Sertalp.
So yeah, particularly, I think one thing I wanted to mention about Vamps that like I don't think he's watching every league he's modeling. Obviously, he is going for the scale, right? So he's using descriptive stats he can find. He's turning them into predictions, and then he's playing those games based on the rules. And as Jonny mentioned, he was able to win some of them. It kind of shows how strong descriptive data could be. I don't think he's adding any particular like diagnostic around them. Like even at the surface level, sometimes you can do it. The challenge with FPL is like there are 11 million people playing this game. So to win it, like you really need some kind. You need to do some more, something more than maybe just using the descriptive stats. So, but yeah, I'm not even like slightly surprised that we have so many analytics winners of these different games. Jonny is one of them. So when it comes to FPL though, like the scale is massive. Like it's just incomprehensible to me that how many people are playing this game as opposed to other formats, other games, other leagues, other fantasy games. So yeah, prediction is quite the thing that everyone is trying to do. And when we say analytics, people typically think about predictive models. Or when people say model, the first thing people think is prediction models. But yeah, model sometimes is more than that. Not only prediction, but also optimization is also a model. as we use it.
You mentioned at the start as well about how a lot of this predictive data still has a subjective element to it, which is why we come up with very similar predicted points to lots of the other sites. They're all kind of generally like Salah and Haaland are better than most of the other players. I think that's that to a point they're subjective. I think if a prediction model was saying that Yuri Tielemans was the best player in the game by a long way, then maybe you'd question whether that's what's come in there. But I'd like to refer people to a blog post by 11ify.com, who also does predictive data for the Premier League, a bit less so for fantasy specifically. They've still got some data on there as well. But he wrote a really interesting article talking about how everything you're doing to predict what's going to happen, you have to make some personal assumptions along the way. So that's why all these models come up with slightly different answers, and will weight things slightly differently and go, okay, like, is this metric that I've taken from this descriptive diagnostic tool, we'll run tests to see which ones tend to be more predictive of other points, but actually it does come down to the belief of the people creating the model. So people tend to, expected goals is one of the most predictive single metrics. But as you said, players can be offside, players can be not get a shot away. So it's not the whole story. So you can build a model that's based purely on past expected goals and this player, but then when they transfer to a better team, you need to work out how much that uptick's going to be, or do you go like, this team's this good, so he's going to get this portion of the goals. And actually the framework in which you build these predictive models, as well as all the assumptions you make in order to turn this descriptive diagnostic data into predictive data, comes with personal assumptions. And the assumptions need to be made at some level. You have to assume something. If you say I'm going to make no assumption, that's still an assumption to some extent. So I think I'll link his article in the description as well. But he's FPL Review's done another one as well about kind of like what a perfect model might be if one existed. Does it still not predicting with 100% accuracy? Like, we can't just say it's going to be 3-0 at the weekend. Like, we're still predicting a range of outcomes with various probabilities, and it comes down a lot to the way that you set it up. So if you can understand what's gone into this predictive model, both on a level of, okay, what prescriptive and diagnostic data are they looking at, but also what's the method that this has gone to turn it into predictive data, then I think you can get a much better understanding of how to fine-tune things or put your beliefs into this, that diagnostic to predictive method I was talking about before. So I think a lot of people in the analytics space have at some point built their own prediction model. Whether they carried on with it or not, I know I sort of canned my first attempt after about half a season once it was getting a bit fiddly. But honestly, making your own one is something that actually really gives you a good insight, even if it's something that you go, okay, I'm not going to use this. This is just an exercise in understanding what might I want to do, think about the parts and how they come together, and how might I project these points. Is really gives you a much better understanding to then use and interpret the data that's out there already, even if you're just taking it at a sort of surface level in your process.
People often think that we take these prediction models as the ultimate truth and building everything around it. But as Jonny mentioned, I mean, there's a lot of subjective decisions that's coming into play. I mean, one of the things I have tried in past was trying to get the like weighted average of different models and come up with a totally different model and see if that could perform well. But these things are very noisy. I mean, everyone who tried to build their own model realized that goals, assists, they're not maybe that difficult, but then you come to bonus and then things get really messy, right? So it is, some stuff are really subjective, so that you can't really, so we talked about how objective descriptive data is typically, and then diagnostic is very little bit weird in that sense, and predictive model has a lot of those decisions that you need to make you need to make some assumptions to build your model. So yes, so it gets a little bit fuzzier at every step.
So my question was to you guys on somebody who is new to models, trying to understand models. How do they get confidence that this prediction model that has been built using the descriptive, because look, I think people know descriptive data exists. There's big websites that collect this data, and now there's some trust on it, right? People use Opta, people use all these footmob, and so they understand it. Diagnostic also, they're trying to understand, okay, you can overlay your thoughts on it. For prediction, people are still, what are the ingredients? So we've talked about, expected goals, expected assists, bonus, CBIT, minutes. How does that all come together, and how does one who doesn't know models or doesn't trust models yet believe in it?
Oh, that's a really challenging question. So, I think in Solio, I think one of the biggest thing we were going for is users should be able to bring their own beliefs, right? So, like, if you don't think a predictive model is particularly correct, just change the part that you are not confident. Is it the assist rate? Is it the goal rate? Is it clean sheet? Maybe you don't think they will keep a clean sheet, so you can reduce the clean sheet. So we wanted to give that power to the user, not necessarily, we came up with a number and then we say like we think this is the best. But obviously, we are putting a lot of effort to make it right. So predictive models are based on, like, even though there are some certain assumptions you need to make and personal decisions, after all, what you are trying to do is you are trying to minimize the error when you apply it to the historical data. You look at, what would I have predicted for this game, and then, how much maybe points they got. So you are trying, so there's a big effort to get as best as possible. And it is an ongoing journey, right? So because every week or maybe even every day, markets are being updated. And then we are trying to, reflect those changes into our prediction model. The fact that it is moving a lot is a little bit annoying, right? So because, like, if you optimize your team now, your wildcard team, suppose, Jonny, and then if you do it next week, you will see two different teams probably. Like, maybe there will be some overlap. Some players will be the same, but some others won't be. Because the problem we are trying to solve is quite difficult. I mean, we will talk about the optimization piece, but you have a limited budget and you are trying to maximize that predicted points. And if those points are moving, how optimal are you? Like, you optimized it and you got a team, but that team is no longer optimal next week. So what does it tell? So I understand that there is a lot of skepticism around these models. Everyone is doing slightly different things, but I think in terms of the performance, if you look at the season-long stats, they are very consistent. I mean, FPL reviews, like, we have a really good understanding of, how consistent FPL reviews projections are, right? So it is it's famous for a reason. So it is pretty solid for a long time period, not specifically a certain game week, maybe because of the noise that the football has. So as you mentioned, some of them are based on historical data, like things like defensive contributions, because that's the best thing you can do. For others, like goals, we use betting market data because we think they capture a lot of other stuff that descriptive stats can have. There's a press conference and suddenly betting market is moving in one direction. That, there is something that you can capture in your model. So yeah, there's a lot of components that's going into it, but at the end of the day, we are like everyone else, we are trying to make it as good as possible, and I believe like we are making progress in that. Like every process we reevaluate after, if a particular thing happens, like we go and check our diagnostic step and see if our assumptions were correct or not, and then if we need to change them.
Yeah, I think I've got 3 points I'd like to make on this that I'm going to say at the top, so that I try and remember where I'm going with this. I was thinking as Sertalp was talking, but the first two are to do with how we're making the predictions, what goes into the prediction model, and the third one is to do with the confidence that we need to have with that. So the first two are to do with generic sort of like baseline rates for the key stats. So it's like goals, assists, clean sheets on a team and a player level. The second point is to do with like the much more diagnostic subjective level of who's playing. Like playing time is a really important thing to be trying to predict. So for the first one, to do with getting the base levels, the bread and butter, as I was saying earlier, the goals and the assists and the clean sheets, so that there's two ways you can really go about, because ultimately we're trying to predict on a player level what the players are going to do, how many goals they're going to score, how many assists they're going to get, in order to turn that into the points. Obviously, the bonus points come as a function of that. There's other points you can get with the defensive contributions and saves for goalkeepers and all sorts. So there's and yellow cards, own goals, red cards, also whatever. But the key points is goals and assists. So you can either go, okay, historically, how many goals has this been playing scoring at a certain rate over the past few seasons? I can try and build in some context. So he was scoring this many goals in the Championship or in the Bundesliga or in the Premier League at this level of team. He's now at this level of team. What's his kind of true underlying rate? Like almost like if he had a true pinpoint value of he's this good at scoring goals. It's a baseline rate of goals. So you can either look at how he's done that in the past, looking at his, maybe some more descriptive data. So goals and assists are quite descriptive, but expected goals and expected assists are more descriptive of the chances and the quality of chances he had, rather than the ones that went in, and look at a baseline rate. And I think people use a rule of thumb of actually like each successive season in the past is about 50% as important if you're using these baseline ways. Or you can look at it from a team level. So you go, okay, the team is going to be about this good. I'm going to predict how good the team is, and then share the goals out amongst the players. And the way that we've built the Solio model, if you want more details, you can watch the pod with Rob that we did a while ago, about actually there's more money on the betting markets at a team level. So they tend to be a bit sharper. We can kind of deduce that they're more likely to be accurate. They also have two-sided markets, so you don't always get on players. Players is any time to score or don't bet, basically. So removing the margins is much harder. So we go, okay, like at team level, this is how many goals the betting markets are projecting. For the upcoming week, we have very accurate data. If we're trying to project beyond that, we look at the level that the teams have been performing generally and add the context in of, was this player missing? Have they signed a new player? Are they better? Are they worse than they were predicting there? And then you go, okay, this player has tended to command about this portion of the goals or assists. And how stable has that been over the last few seasons? So Salah's has actually been really stable amongst all manner of different sort of attacking lineups. So obviously his age curve comes into it now. Is he going to be playing as much? Is it going to, the attackers are very strong? That might dint it a little bit more, but we can be fairly sure that he's getting about this many of Salah's goals. Then there's like the positional level. So okay, like if he's playing as a number 9 suddenly, or if he's playing as a winger, or if they put him at a right wing back in some sort of odd system, seems unlikely, but it would affect his goal output. So I'm trying to project, okay, where's this player playing? So you can anchor to, okay, how good has the player in this position for this team been? If I have a new player who's coming in, so maybe, we've got 2 new strikers at Newcastle. How good has the striker position? Obviously, Isak was very good. But how many goals has the striker scored for Newcastle? And it's kind of a sign of proportional one there. So if I think that this player is way better, I can anchor from that point and move it. If I think he's way worse, I can anchor from that point rather than overshooting. And then the second point is to do with projecting who's playing. So this is the one where the diagnostic level comes in a lot more, because there's not really much data on who's going to play other than who has played and what is the manager saying, and tactically what makes sense for this sort of team. But this is the one where the human level really has to come into it. And it's the kind of thing that is just the hardest to automate. So actually you can automate a lot of the stuff on how good is this team going to be. You have to add in the human level of this player's missing, this player's come in, vice versa, the opposition's missing their centre backs, whatever. But who's playing is going, the goals and assists are a function of who's playing. So I need to predict who's playing, and that's something that I think isn't really analytics to some extent. It is in that you're going through this descriptive, diagnostic, predictive process of who played, why were they playing, why did the manager use that lineup, what lineup is he going to use in future. But the only way we can really look at like predicted playing time over the season is by maybe looking at the sort of season-long spread market goals for, they're predicting Haaland to score this many goals. If I think he scores at about this rate, he's probably playing most of the games. Whereas if we look at like what the markets are doing on Wissa and Waltermada, then we can kind of infer, okay, they're predicting this many minutes for this sort of player, and you can look over a season. But the third point is to do with sort of like how confident we need to be in those predictions, and this is kind of what ties into the prediction to optimization point of view. Is actually like sometimes you can just make an assumption and go, okay, like I'm not super confident in it, but this is a sort of central point of where I'd put them. And actually, if in the optimization process this player never appears in the solutions or always appears in the solutions, you don't really need to worry too much about whether it needs to move up or down a little bit, because you know that within that range they're always appearing or never appearing. So I think I talked about trying to put the players and teams on these ranges. Mm-hmm. So if I'm less confident, if I have less data, if Walter Mada's come in with 2,000 odd minutes in a top league, he's young, he's not got much experience. I remember talking about Nicholas Jackson when he came to Chelsea, looked really good, but he'd only had one season at Villarreal of a similar number of minutes to Walter Mada. So we can expect that he might be really good, but he might not. He's quite raw. Darwin coming to Liverpool was another player who didn't have that much experience at a top level. So the range of potential outcomes is higher. So it's not that we can still put a reasonable estimate on his midpoint, but we might want to test out what happens if he's about this good, what happens if he's much better. So from a confidence point of view, it's not always, we're going to try and underpredict because we're less sure or overpredict because we're less sure. They tend to balance out on either side. It's more that I need to, if this player's appearing in close to my top solutions or always, I need to test, does that still happen when he's a bit worse if I have a pessimistic view or an optimistic view? So I think that's sometimes where, again, taking these optimized solutions at face value is where you miss out on that area where you're not as confident on it, because we can't be fully confident. Well, we can't be fully confident about any of it. Salah might just not play at the weekend because personal reasons, anything. We had, who was it? Jorginho Rutter just suddenly wasn't playing it for the Brighton game, and we heard nothing of it. Like, just people just don't play sometimes. Yeah, so we can never be 100% sure, but we can be pretty sure about generically the average number of output we can expect from some of the players who've been playing for 6-7 seasons in the same position in the same team. But the team's evolved, all sorts has changed. So the new players, it's more that we should expect them to our updates to be a bit slightly more volatile. So if he plays really well, Walter Mada, and scores lots of goals in the first few games, we might be more prone to moving it up a little bit more. Whereas if, Salah has a terrible start to the season or an unbelievable start to the season, we're more sure that he's going to revert to about this level that he's been at so far. So I think it's your update speed that tends to change a little bit as well with that data. But that's why you try and anchor it to other parts that you're more sure about. So I'm more sure about how good Newcastle are than I am about Walter Mada. I'm more sure about how they play and how many goals they give to their striker than I am about Walter Mada as a player. So I can try and anchor to points that I'm much more confident in than just relying on Walter Mada's last season at Stuttgart was about this good, and the Bundesliga to Premier League transition's about this good, and leave it at that. But yeah, it's a complicated process and one that we're sort of discussing all the time. And in terms of my confidence in what we're doing will vary, and they bring in a new metric that we haven't done before. Our confidence in our team level goals and our player goal levels is higher than our confidence in our, we're still confident in our CBIT predictions, but I'd say we're less confident than we are in our goals because it's the same for everyone. This is a new thing we haven't predicted before. So it comes in all manners, all shapes and forms.
With the excellent tool that Solio has been for everybody, I would like to think we have taken people through the journey of moving from diagnostic to prediction, because I see Solio predictions everywhere, right? The next 6 game weeks, next 8 game weeks, per 90 goals, clean sheet odds, even CBIT percentages, which is fantastic. But I think the next part is how do you use those predictions, because you could have Haaland as the highest prediction but still is not optimal. So how do you optimize this setup?
Optimal is a very loaded term in FPL. There was like a time where
I blame you.
saying yeah, maybe, but yeah, like even saying optimal to like anything was drawing a lot of criticism. So I think it's a very, again, misunderstood concept. When we say optimal, we are talking about optimal in a technical sense. So if you are sure about your predictions, suppose you have a set of predictions and you're wondering, what's the optimal decision here, then we can calculate it. So it is, even though, like I said, from descriptive to diagnostic to predictive analytics, things get a little bit fuzzier. Optimization is a very exact science. If your predictive model, if our predictions are exact, in some cases they are, like there's no like variance or anything for some of the problems we solve, and you can optimize it. I mean, things as trivial as like solving a Sudoku problem is an optimization problem. There's only one feasible solution and you can solve it. That's an exact problem that you are trying to solve. Everything we do in life, I know this sounds a little bit funny, but every decision we make in life, we are trying to make the optimal decision, like where to buy a house from, which school to send the kids to, which job to accept. So everything we are kind of trying to include a lot of things and balance. In FPL, it's similar, right? We have a limited budget and we are trying to fit a squad of 15 players that will maximize our chance of winning the FPL, or maybe in average give us most points. In FPL particularly, the optimal is very sensitive, in the sense that I have a set of projections here, and I can calculate the optimal team that will maximize my average case performance. But there are a lot of like personal choices come into play. Maybe I don't want to optimize my average case. Maybe I want to, shoot for the stars and see if I can get really lucky. Then maybe I want to increase my risk level and I want to, maximize my chance of winning FPL, even though it's a tiny bit increase, a very, very tiny bit. Then you might want to bet against popular players. You can say that I will spend that money for other players and I hope that this popular player will blank. That's also a type of optimization problem, and that's your optimal. So it is this concept of, there's only one optimal team, one, Solio optimal team, one review optimal team. And then people look at others people and say that, well, obviously you used like Solio projections. That's not exactly, what we are going for, right? So we think you should be able to bring your own objectives, your beliefs, your constraints, whatever it is, to calculate the optimal. So we have a like state-of-the-art solver in our tool. I'm just very proud of the whole thing. I can talk about it for another hour, but essentially, based on what you are giving as an input, we are trying to tell you that, well, this is the optimal. So this is one of the fun parts for me for analytics. Well, obviously I love optimization, but I think trying to find that squad of 15 players based on your, beliefs is a very challenging task. But if you are a person who are really good at understanding football, predicting stuff, you should be able to find an optimal FPL team that's reflecting your beliefs the best way possible, right? So the problem itself is very challenging, and you can have ideas about all these like 700 plus FPL players that you can choose from. You are kind of limiting your options, right? You are saying that maybe Isaac will do pretty good at Liverpool. I'm going to increase his goal share or minutes. Then you are kind of telling me that, okay, I really trust Isaac, but what's the rest of my squad should look like based on that? Or maybe I don't think this team will keep a clean sheet, I reduce it. So that's why when people say, oh, like this is the Solio optimal, well, by default, it's true. But that's not what we want people to do. We want people to, again, use their own input. For optimization, I should say it's also called prescriptive analytics because you are giving a prescription. Obviously, we have a lot of tools. Like we have the Python solver that we wrote. It's still an open source package, and we are still maintaining it. There are optimization solver like softwares that you write the model on top of. Like for example, Highs is an example of it. And there are a lot of other tools too. Like people have developed Excel solvers. So essentially you load your predictions into an Excel spreadsheet, and then you can run an optimization solver in it. So there are a lot of ways to optimize it. There are a lot of different ways to, again, define what optimal is for you. And also one more thing here is that even if suppose you are using the default stuff and you optimize it, and then people say, oh, like Solio is giving me a Salah squad, no Haaland. I'm very upset about it. Even if suppose like you didn't change anything and then you are a little bit upset that Haaland is not here, like in your squad, it is possible that some of Salah's projection is coming from certain type of noise. It could be bonus projection, it could be CBIT, I don't know. But if you reduce Salah's projections 0.3, suddenly he's no longer in the optimal team. Or like maybe as small as 0.1 or maybe sometimes 0.05. So because there's a ton of combinations in FPL around the optimal solution, like even if your like input is exact, there are a ton of teams around it. So that's why you need to play around. You need to maybe lock Haaland in place and resolve it and see if there's any significant difference. Sometimes it's so close that you can't really reliably tell what the optimal solution here is. For a deterministic input, yes, maybe Salah is optimal, but Haaland squad is like 0.2 projection point away. So that's what we call a close suboptimal. And people are making kind of like sometimes assuming that, oh, Solio told me not to buy Haaland and then he scored a hat-trick. Clearly this model is not working. That's not exactly true. We predicted him to get a lot of points as well as Salah, but Salah gets more points from bonus typically, so he was a step ahead. In average, if we could repeat the same game week 100 times, maybe Salah squads will be ahead in general. But we only have a chance to realize one game week, and people are kind of making a mistake or like overgeneralizing that, oh, like Solio told me to do this. Well, Solio is not exactly telling you what to do. It's just using your input to give you what your ideal or your optimal look like. So optimal is, again, a very loaded term in FPL, but yeah, I would like to answer if you have any questions. Pras.
I would say one thing to people again who are new to optimization, new to modeling. I mean, no one's new to optimization, but within the context of FPL, I think one fundamental difference, and this has been said, I think, in Above Average, and it's obviously a popular analytics thing where you have to think about paths, right? So optimization gives you paths. So yes, last game week people were thinking about taking out Palmer, for example. And so there are so many ways you can go about it. You can, if Saka was fit, you can go there. You can go Bruno. You can go all the way down to Anderson or even, King. But the answer isn't you compare these players. The answer isn't you compare one transfer or two free transfers. The answer is in game week 7, if you did something, can you afford a Gabriel or a Gyökeres? In game week 9, can you back for captaincy? It's that kind of thing where, yes, you can do it manually, but it's not about whether you pick Sar or whether you pick Semenyo or is whether you pick Anderson or Paqueta. Of course, there's a little bit of that because you will get those gains immediately, but it's about the path, and you're using the tools, Solio in this instance, to give you your options and you give you what is the best based on your path, your team, rest of your team, captaincy, everything around that as your best move that you can consider. So that's what I really like about it, that people should take that next step, because I feel they have reached the stage of understanding predictions and trusting predictions, but they have to make the leap into also saying, maybe I should trust a little bit of optimization and then I'll play around with it. What happens if in my optimization I say, I don't want Palmer in game week 9, he's rubbish. Okay, you ban Palmer and then see what is your new path that is optimal for you. You can say, I think Gyökeres is a donkey, he will not score any goals. Fine, change that. Again, play around with it and get what is optimal in that scenario, and then make your decision. I think that's a really key thing that people, if they want to improve their decision making, for them to incorporate.
I think as well, like as Sertalp was mentioning about all these close suboptimal solutions, is actually like the term optimal does, from a mathematical point of view, mean the one that has produced the most predicted points based on these assumptions. So the assumptions are that this predictive points are fully accurate, they won't change, and I'm weighting this game week this much and this game week this much, and I transfer this much, and all manner of different things. So the optimal solution is under all those assumptions. Sometimes you can be so sure about the assumptions because it's something like a Sudoku where there's no uncertainty. It's a sort of closed game. Or what we've done before is we've looked at like what was the hindsight optimal team, like how many points could I have got? So those points are locked in, they're not changing. So there exists a team and series of moves that would have got the most points over the season. And it's funny looking at it because it's usually about 2,000 points ahead of whatever we end up getting. Because you end up hitting this defender's hat trick and probably a Dan Ballard at the start and all sorts. But what we're doing is we're solving with kind of slightly fuzzy data. So we do the optimization problem by taking the assumption that these average points are it's this exact point, and then you solve with those numbers. But those numbers aren't perfect. Like there's kind of a range of outcomes that they could fit in again. So if you go, again, the top solution is a Salah team. But if I, say I don't want Salah, what's the top solution without a Salah team? Often it's a very similar amount of predicted points. So again, you might say, okay, I think Palmer's not very good in game week 9. I'm going to see what the best solution or path is without him in it. And if it comes up pretty close, you go, okay, yeah, that's fine. I can do that. Sometimes you'll do something and the generated solution will be scoring so many fewer points that you go, okay, like maybe I should rethink that, or I need to be more sure that that's what I want to do because I'm foregoing a reasonable amount of predicted points in this path in order to do that. But sometimes that's at the cost of something else. Sometimes it puts you in a more flexible team position in order to adapt. So actually it's okay to take that sacrifice, or maybe you're like, actually, I am really sure that Palmer's not going to be playing or he's out for a while. And I think it's been really interesting to kind of go like, okay, so we've taken these optimization constraints in the way that we've written them for the rules of fantasy football, FPL, but also you can look at it for similar problems. So something that Sam and Rob and I and a few other guys in the server who play the multi-format games have gone, okay, well, the transfer rules are different here, and the way that this game works is actually like, how do we optimize for this new game where I have 45 transfers and I can make them at any point in the season and I can make it between games at the weekend? And you can take what we've learned from FPL, but actually go, okay, this is a different problem. I need to construct some new assumptions around this new game. Or some of the multi-entry type games, you're trying to generate 15 to 20 lineups for you to enter as a portfolio rather than a single entry. So again, you're trying to stack within the teams and have some different ones. And sometimes you talked about close suboptimal solutions. Sometimes there is a top solution that appears in some of these games where maybe on the free hit there just exists this amazing squad that you can't really get close without changing a few players, or maybe the structures locked in, and really what you are doing is which 4.5 defender do I want, because if I change the structure it's scoring so many fewer points. But that again can be something where you go, I think everyone else is going to do this, so I'm going to go against it for some relative risk. So it's called the chalk lineup in these daily fantasy games. So people try not to enter it because other people are going to enter it because it's kind of too obvious. So you can apply the same thought process to, okay, what is the obvious solution everyone else is going to do, and how can I find a close suboptimal solution that's really different, and try and find something that's like that, or a close suboptimal solution that has more players from the team that I support. That's a valid thing you can do if you're a Liverpool fan and you want Isak and Ekitike and Gakpo and whatever. Then if you can find a close suboptimal solution that matches what you want in your team, or just any personal preference, maybe there's a player that you like watching and you can find a solution with him in that's almost as good as the optimal solution, then you can go and do that. Sometimes it's like there's these additional constraints that are just how do I want to enjoy playing the game more so than exactly going like how do I generate the best team that might do the best, because we're playing for fun as well for the most part. I think, you know, if you can find a team that is more fun to you but very good, then you can balance those two objectives in the same way with these optimization tools, and it just helps you generate those lineups to test and see and work out how all the pieces fit together in these paths. And yeah, you can understand what other people are going to try and do. And okay, this period is when people want the Arsenal players because they come up a lot in my solutions. Maybe I don't want to do that, etc.
As we covered all the steps of analytics, I want to talk about, you know, where Solio sits like between all of these. So we do a lot of things, a lot of stages of analytics. We do diagnostic, partially, prediction, again partially, and optimization fully, I will say. So diagnostic, because we have Jonny and Rob looking at teams every few days. They are trying to predict the minutes of players. So we have tried a few things and then noticed that you need some kind of a human element to be able to predict who will start the games and, you know, how much game time they will get. So that thing is very, again, like a little bit subjective. That is very difficult to do. So we do some partial diagnostic because of it. Prediction, as we mentioned many times, we use like betting market data when available, and then for the remaining stuff, we use some historical data. And Jürgen always wants me to add that we use some kind of magic to generate prediction models, our prediction model. But we, like, I think this is the first time ever, like, we made it fully transparent. You can see all the components, like where the points are coming from. It's not just like a magic number that's appearing on your screen like 6.5, but you can actually see, you know, how many points are coming from goals, clean sheets, assists, and you can adjust it. And we are adding even more flexibility to that process pretty soon. So we do prediction modeling, you know, much different than everyone else is doing, in my opinion. And when it comes to optimization, I would say that we have done a lot of, we have spent a lot of time on improving the optimization process itself. Because before Solio, the only way to optimize was just a deterministic line. We had the Python solver and everything, but again, you have some data, you are optimizing over a deterministic scenario where you are hoping that everyone will be okay, like no one will get injured, no one will get rotated, they won't lose minutes. To compensate some of these, we were adding some parameters, like, let's add some value to free transfer so that the solver doesn't use free transfer immediately. But if you think about it, it is an artificial construct. Like, free transfer doesn't have a value. In general, you don't get points from rolling, right? So it's that hope that you will be able to use that free transfer in future for an emergency, that you don't need to take a hit. That's what you are going for. Or maybe like you are thinking that I can shift my funds from forward to midfield if I have 2 or 3 free transfers. So I want to be at that level going forward. But now we have a stochastic optimization in Solio that no one else has. So you can create branches where in this branch, I think Isaac will get more minutes. In this one, he won't. And then, or it will be much more noticeable when we come to like blanks and doubles period. There's a lot of fixture combinations that you really don't know what to do. It is overwhelming. Even like as a player, I find it very overwhelming to think about those scenarios. But you can model it, you can solve it, and then you will get a recommendation that do this transfer. If when any of these things happen, you have different options when the doubles are announced. Or maybe like we have a better idea about Isaac's minutes. Maybe he will get a lot of minutes, and I want to be in a position that I can transfer him in if I think that he will get a lot of points. So I think that's one of the biggest things. So for all these steps, diagnostic analytics, predictive, prescriptive analytics, meaning optimization, we have spent a lot of time to make it really great. I mean, as I mentioned, for diagnostic, Jonny and Rob is spending a lot of time. Rob is also helping us with the prediction and for the optimization. James and I am developing the optimization solver, trying to improve it, add new features to it. So we are working all of these stages of analytics. The only thing we don't do is descriptive. So I was thinking maybe we should send, Jürgen or Jonny or others to some game so they can do some, manual notebook stat collection so that we can say that we do every stage of analytics. But yeah, so I think we cover a wide range of analytics stuff in Solio.
I mean, I fully agree. I mean, I have been, as I mentioned, through the processes, through the various stages, that as the user, I mean, I'm a big user, and I have seen a lot of new people getting onto the platform and understanding this. I think they can appreciate these steps and how Solio adds value in each of them. So, certainly, I think as we go along in the season, the value increases even more. I think sometimes, early season things can be noisier. We're also trying to understand new formations, new managers, new players, new signings. And so the value of what you're trying to get from some of this, especially the last two stages, gets bigger and bigger.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm quite excited about it.
So we talked all about the analytics, and I want to talk about decision making, because I mentioned that we are actually doing, science of decision making, better decision making. But decision making is a very complex process. There is, as I mentioned, there are some objective facts that's coming from data. Typically gives you some kind of like objective overview of what happened in the past. But you also have a subjective place where your opinions, mainly diagnostic analytics, but also some others, are taking place. So sometimes it feels like they are conflicting with each other, like what data is telling you and your opinions, and then you disagree. But it is like everything we do is in this scale, right? So there is a big range of thoughts that whatever you are thinking, you are in the range somewhere. You might be bringing more of your opinions into the piece for your decision making, which is perfectly fine. Or maybe you are relying more on the data, or maybe like aggregate stuff, so that you are trying to not to get too much caught on the noise. So decision making itself is pretty difficult, but at the end of the day, we are all trying to, again, predict and then optimize, even if we realize or not. Even the people who are anti-analytics, like they are very proud to say that I'm anti analytics. At the end of the day, that's what you are doing too. If you are doing it with your opinions, but that's what you are doing. You are trying to optimize your decisions based on your beliefs. And
Correct.
we think analytics is everyone is doing, whether they realize or not. So it is not like data and objective stuff is more analytics, and anything subjective or like opinionated stuff is anti-analytics or non-analytics. It's just a big framework that decision making can cover both sides at the same time. It's not against each other. It's all inclusive, I think.
We sometimes do the binary faction stuff because it's fun. But yeah, in terms of what's actually going on under the hood, it's not like oh, this is data and this is grass, or this is some made up opinion. Like it all comes together. Yeah, it's a spectrum, but
yeah,
it is fun to take sides sometimes.
And in the next one, I want to talk about a little bit about the outcomes, because when we were building the Solio web tool, one thing that we discussed quite a bit is, outcomes are not certain, right? So it's not like black or white. So you can't really say that, well, +5 compared to the field, like we expect you to have 5 more points than average. Like a field average, if we repeat the game week like 100 times. In this case, for example, 9.1 for I think a bench boost team I have. But there's a range of outcomes, and we wanted to show this, that there's still a chance that you will get a red arrow even if you use your bench boost, even if you use free hit, and that happens all the time. People get red arrow on their free hit. even though they create the perfect team, they maximize points. Even if you're not using analytics, like in your mind, you're like going through all the teams, all the players, and then you are putting a team. You are very confident. Game week starts and everything falls apart. Your players are blanking, and then you get a red arrow. But I mean, it's a range of outcomes. In this case, for example, for a bench boost, I think team I made, like the green arrow chance is 85%. But it means that 15% chance of getting a red arrow. And that's very significant, actually. 15% is a big chunk. Like, you can't really tell that, I will get a green arrow for sure. We can even calculate probability of getting a big arrow. Like in this case, it's like 45%, like more than 10 point difference to the average. Because all of these things they are not exactly like, so we don't expect Salah to get exactly 6.5. There's a range of outcomes. If he scores a goal, he's jumping from maybe like 2 points to suddenly, maybe 9 because of you add the bonus and everything. So it is important to understand that these outcomes are probabilistic. They are not exact, and that's what we are trying to do. In future, you will also see in the Solio tool that we are going to provide even more tools to chase that upside, because some people love chasing that risk, right? They really want to have some really big jump. Maybe it's the end of the season and there's a significant difference between you and the mini league leader. You need to make some risky moves to be able to catch up. Or maybe like you are already leading, you want to play safe and maybe increase your chance of winning it. So all of these are within this framework in our minds. But yeah, outcomes are probabilistic. Is just I wanted to say, even though like we are doing all this stuff, we are generating a single number. I mean, that's at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that can happen. It is just an average case prediction. Salah can score 0 goals, 1 goal, 2 goals, get a hat trick. So all of those are inside this spectrum.
I think this is also kind of illustrates why it's quite hard to. Sometimes we get questions like, was your model right or wrong? Or people say it was wrong or it was right. And actually, like, if I scored 20 points more than the average on my bench boost, was the model right? Or did it, we only take a measurement once. So it's hard to really say, like, if you predict Salah 6.5 points and he gets 6 points, then that was right. But if he scores a hat trick, then you were wrong, but you were also accounting for the fact that he might do that. So I think this is where it's not that the model can't be accurate or inaccurate, it's that answering that question is really difficult because it's this probability distribution rather than sort of staking a claim on singular outcomes. Yes. So again, that's why it's quite hard to compare different models and go like, okay, well, like, did your team outperform another model? Did your model outperform this other model? That's quite hard to, especially over one game week where actually it's going to be wrong. Like if anyone's model predicted Dan Ballard 17 points in the first week, then I think that would probably be a marker that the model's wrong, even though it was actually bang on. Like that's not what's going to happen most of the time.
And I think I wanted to close the entire discussion by answering a question that Pras asked me, actually, like, why analytics? That's something you need to explain, he told me, and I want to answer it as much as I can. So I think the first one is the one thing that I love about analytics, and by the way, these are my kind of subjective opinions on the topic. As I mentioned that everyone is doing analytics, even if they realize or not. But the first one is for especially the type of analytics we do, we put a lot of emphasis on decision making, also known as process, not outcome. So sometimes, your captain will blank or, your defenders will lose their clean sheet at the last minute, but there's more emphasis on decision making itself. Like that's what we are trying to improve, right? And it teaches you different things, like transfer discipline is one of them, or like assessing hits, if they're worth it or not, that's another thing. And having a team that you can rotate in certain seasons, or maybe like carrying a weak bench, sometimes it's better for certain types of seasons. So analytics teaches you all of those, like along the way, like you get a better idea on what FPL is, like at a mathematical level. And so one thing I see often is at the end of the season, especially, or at the beginning of the season, people share their lessons from the previous seasons. Some of them are useful, but most of them are pretty like biased. You realized one season and then now your opinions change all the way to the other side. That doesn't sound very healthy typically. But so some of these lessons are can be misleading, I should say. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to show that in the average case, like these are the ideal processes. This is how you make decisions. Again, like whether you realize or not, that's how it is. The second one is we are spending a lot of time trying to make sense of the unpredictable side of football, because football is a very high variance game. And then you can really get upset about certain outcomes. I mean, I do quite a bit. Like you can blame the luck, you can blame variance, you can blame models, you can blame your friend who just convinced you to buy a certain player. But seeing that, oh, there is actually a distribution of outcomes here, and then things can go in my way or not. Like there's a person, there's a certain probability assigned to getting a green arrow or maybe a big green arrow. That those kind of things help quite a bit. Like even though, like I said, that our emphasis is on decision making, we are still trying to win FPL or like win our mini leagues. So we are trying to understand, why things happened. Was I lucky? For example, I got 2 9-pointers from my cheap defender, Gudmundsson, and like I know I'm lucky with that, right? So even though, like, yes, maybe Solio model at the end of the day suggested that player to me, but I know that I was quite lucky to get that outcome, because if we repeat it 100 times, in average, he's not going to get 9 points in those game weeks. It will get lower and lower. The third benefit of analytics is decision support. So you explore the area much faster than other types of playing the game, because we talked about how everyone does analytics, right? So you need to collect some information. Either you watch games, or maybe you read other people's opinions on it. You kind of do some kind of synthesis, and then do some kind of future prediction. What's going to happen, is Haaland going to score a hat-trick in the next game or not? And then you are trying to optimize your decisions. All of these steps require a lot of effort to do. That's kind of why we like FPL, because it's such a it's very deep, right? So you can actually get deeper and deeper, but at the end of the day, if your players are blanking, you will get upset. But you can explore different types of paths quite easily. Pras, actually, you mentioned about that's what Solio is enabling. Yes, you can see different paths. Like, what if I keep Palmer? What if I sell him? Then what do I do? Am I exposing myself to some risk when people are keeping him? Or what's the percent probability of getting a green arrow if I do this and this? So all of these, I think we provide I don't want to say better necessarily, but easier answers, so that you can focus on the important thing. That's the your diagnostic analytics mainly, that you are trying to read the game. You are doing, in my opinion, you are doing the fun part, because when it comes to optimization, even if you are the best at predicting football, optimizing is a really big task, and it is almost impossible to do it by hand. Even like with the fastest computers, it's taking several minutes sometimes. You are not going to be able to do it by hand. So we are doing that boring part for you, because that's a mathematics problem. No one wants to try different combination and see if it works. But you certainly want to see different paths. But, I should say, like, you want to see different paths, but yes. Yeah, and as a bonus, this is not like maybe an exact answer, but analytics has a great community. We have a Discord server, we have analytics server, we have a different Discord server for Solio users, where we discuss FPL and decision making. On Twitter, a lot of like analytics people and Blue Sky people always talk about analytics and processes. And as I mentioned, Solio, we are trying to be your go-to address. Even if you are new to analytics or a very seasoned analytics player, we are trying to include everyone.
I love it. I mean, it's really. I can say as somebody who I feel has made. I don't want to say the transition fully, but I want to say that has brought analytics into their game. I've been playing for 15 years, and I can see myself moving on that chart, right? On how I've played, and outcomes obviously vary, but it has helped me appreciate the game a lot more in terms of what are the moving parts, what are the decisions you need to make, what are the tools that you need to make those decisions, not to regret over outcomes as much because there were so many ranges of outcomes that were possible. Every pick is a good pick, but not every pick can be in your team. And so it's things like that that just help you become better. So I have, I embraced it, and I've met some lovely people. Your fourth point is actually a really important point, that it's not that you're meeting rocket scientists and PhDs, even though we have two of those here on this podcast. But, it's you meet football fans, you meet real fans who are using analytics to make these decisions. I mean, some of the channels like the X Minutes channels have real football discussion at a very deep level, which is really, really good. And all of that goes into analytics. So, I'm a convert to the extent that I can convert, but I hope this has been useful for people who are either fully analytical or not analytical or in the middle somewhere. Hopefully, it's helpful for anyone.
Lovely. I think we can probably wrap up there. What did we say? We said we'd try and do it in under an hour, and we haven't.
It's the international break.
But yeah, Pras is here this time. I think I did one with Baker, and we said, "Oh, we'll keep it short." You said we'd keep it short next week, and then you weren't here, and God, I don't know how long we talked. Hour 45. But yeah, it was lovely to chat. I think that was great stuff. It's all stuff I've kind of like spoken about with Sertalp before, but just to kind of formally dig into it and work through it, and yeah, it gives me a few ideas as we were going through as well. I think there's a few bits I hadn't really thought of or hadn't thought of in that way. And yeah, I think this is just something that has, well, I mean, over the last 3 or 4 years, from a personal point of view, this has really inspired me and really, grabbed my attention, and I've got really deep into it, and to the point where, 3 or 4 years ago, I was trying to work out how to download Sertalp solver onto my computer and run it, and now we're building a website together. It's been amazing. So yeah, good to chat.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed talking with you guys, and you're doing a great job with the podcast, and big fan.
We have to get you on more, Sertalp. You can't shy away, so we'll get you on more talking about your team. You're doing really well as a start. I saw in the Content Creators League you were in the top 10. So you are a content creator, don't forget, Sertalp. So we'll get you back very soon.
He's top of our Solio League as well.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
You're at the top. Rob's down the bottom.
Lots of time to
I'll
catch
point him
up.
out.
Excellent, everybody. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week. Jonny is on Wildcard, which I have also discovered on this podcast.
Yes.
But we will be talking about all of the stochastic optimization that Jonny is doing to get to his optimal wildcard, which is, I think I used all the good lingo there.
Oh, yeah. All the buzzwords. Perfect.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the international break.